If you've ever been disillusioned, disappointed, or discouraged in your search for love, and you know there has to be a better way to find the healthy, soul-filling love you've always longed for, then you've discovered the podcast for you. I know, as Ken's work personally has led me to find the love of my life. So here's your host of Deeper Dating, Ken Page.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Deeper Dating Podcast. I am so glad to be with you here today and so excited about my guest, Colette Fehr, who is the author of the upcoming book, The Cost of Quiet: How to Have the Hard Conversations That Create Secure, Lasting Love. And so I'm just really excited to be here with Colette, and I'm just going to say a few things before we jump in. I just want to say that in this and every episode, I try to share with you the greatest insights and tools that I know to help you find love and keep it flourishing and growing and heal your life in the process, because the skills of dating are the skills of intimacy. And those are the greatest skills of all for a meaningful, happy life. And if you want to learn more about the deeper dating path to intimacy, you can just go to deeperdatingpodcast.com and you can find transcripts of every episode there. And if you go to deeperdatinggifts.com, or if you sign on the podcast, you can get a copy of my ebook of concepts that have gone viral on Psychology Today. And it's called The 5 Keys to Deeper Intimacy. So I'm so glad to have all of you with me, and I'm so glad to be sharing this time with Colette. So welcome, Colette.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and I can't wait for this conversation. Thanks for having me.
I just think that this is such a truly important piece of the whole intimacy journey, and I'm thrilled that my listeners are going to be getting tools and insights from you for how to make this come alive in their relationships. But I want to tell everybody a little bit about you first, because I was just really excited to have you on. So Colette is a licensed psychotherapist, a nationally recognized relationship expert, and the author of The Cost of Quiet: How to Have the Hard Conversations That Create Secure, Lasting Love. And this book is coming out on February 3rd, 2026. So that's a really exciting contribution. And Colette co-hosts the popular podcasts Insights from the Couch, Real Talk for Women at Midlife, and Love Thy Neighbor, the Relationships Show. Also, her 2025 TEDx talk, Secrets of a Couples Therapist, was actually selected as a TED editor's pick, and she's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Oprah Daily, and other major media outlets. This topic matters so much, so I am so glad to have you here, Colette. And I want to begin with a question, and that is, can you tell us why this matters so much to you, personally and also in your professional mission?
Yes, it really matters so much to me because I lived the flip side of this journey where I allowed my voice to be silenced. I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, of course, in my first marriage, for many of the same reasons that so many of my clients come into my office for therapy saying the same things I once did, that, well, I want to communicate, but I can't. I don't get a good response. We just get into a dead-end argument. He, she, they don't respond well to me when I try. And I noticed these patterns that I related to so much from my own failed first marriage, where you think you're communicating, but you're really not necessarily saying it in the way that is the most clear, vulnerable, assertive, which are the tools I teach in my book. And then knowing how to take care of ourselves emotionally when and if we don't get the response we want. And just seeing that this is such a pervasive problem is really why I'm so passionate about this, that when I say quiet in the title of the book, sometimes it's self-silencing and losing your voice like I did. But oftentimes, quiet's really a euphemism for conflict avoidance. And we're all scared of conflict naturally. It's human because of how we're evolutionarily wired, right? To fear anything that feels like a threat to our relationship. But if we want that emotional intimacy, we know that conflict is actually the best way to get there if we know how to harness it for its possibility for deeper connection. So that's what the book is all about. And I think, I have so many people in my office who are like me in that they're assertive in other areas of their life. They have great jobs, right? They're not shrinking violets. And yet when it comes to their relationships, because of a multitude of factors I outline in the book, they find themselves saying, oh, it's not a good idea to bring that up, or I'll just let that go. And when we do that, when we don't address the small frustrations, whether we're dating or in a long-term relationship or with colleagues or our family members or our friends, these things accumulate like pebbles in a jar, and they tend to calcify and harden into resentment that destroys the relationship over time. And also, most importantly, the greatest cost that I refer to is that it ruins your relationship with yourself. It ruins your inner well-being.
So powerful. And all those things are so true. And there's kind of a cascade of consequences that happen both inside ourselves and in the relationship from that. But like you said, it is so scary. It's so scary to do this. Can you talk more about that fear? The kind of like before you speak out, the fear that you might feel, maybe you feel some kind of dissociation, maybe numbness. You might not even be conscious fully that something's wrong. So if you could talk about that kind of backstory before we get to the point of communication, kind of what happens inside us.
I'm glad you're asking this because this is actually really the hardest part.
Yeah.
And you're right that it's often unconscious. And I want to just acknowledge that many people have been through significant trauma. Emotional neglect even is just as traumatic as physical abuse. There are so many different versions. So for those of us who had very challenging family of origin experiences or childhood experiences, if there was abuse, if it wasn't safe to speak up, if it was never modeled that people handled conflict in a healthy way, which for most of us, I like to say if you're over 40, certainly, you probably didn't see a lot of emotional attunement in your household, even if you had a pretty good family of origin. It just wasn't the thing back then, right? I had great parents, even though they got divorced, wonderful people, very loving, but nobody was leaning in, looking me in the eye and saying like, how are you feeling, Colette, right? My parents weren't raised that way. So, this is something very new to most of us.
So true.
Yes, absolutely. And I talk a lot about attachment science and attachment styles in the book and how our family of origin experiences condition this. But then there is the simple fact that regardless of that, regardless of trauma, it is very scary to lean into a conflictual moment. And this is because of our biological wiring to need other people. We're wired for connection. We're pro-social herd animals. So it's in our DNA and in our neurobiology that if something feels like it could jeopardize the relationship being good, right? Even a little moment, you see someone, you're at a date and somebody's eyebrow goes up, like they didn't like what you said, right? We have an unconscious, deep wiring that sets off an alarm bell that goes, danger, danger, danger. Don't do that, right? That's going to rock the boat. That's going to push this person away. They didn't like it. We're relational beings. So when we talk about leaning into conflict, it's natural to feel afraid of something that feels like it could jeopardize or threaten the attachment bond or the burgeoning attachment bond. And then also, let's be real about our biology in terms of pain. If you don't get a great response, it hurts. And we are averse to anything as human beings that brings pain. So the idea of embracing conflict can feel like to people, I'm telling you to go put your hand on a hot stove, right? It's completely counterintuitive. And yet, this fear is so natural and normal. But there's two things I really want people to know that I feel very confident are true. from years of doing this work. One is that the anticipatory fear is usually far worse than the thing itself.
Yes.
Far, far, far worse. And then the second is that we know from the psychological concept of the paradox of fear that the more you do the thing you're scared of, the easier it becomes. So every time you dive into a conversation and you say something when you might have in the past been tempted to let it go, you work through the fear. You're going to feel afraid. So like psychologist Susan Jeffries said decades ago, feel the fear and do it anyway. You actually speak up. A part of you goes, oh, wow, look at that. I didn't die from that, right? It wasn't as bad as I thought. And then you start to build an emotional muscle where it just becomes easier and easier. And we find that with certain tools that I'm happy to elaborate on at whatever point you want me to, that with the way you speak up, you often do get a good response. And as you develop yourself, you realize as an emotionally mature adult that even though it's not always ideal and it can feel painful, you can also handle when you don't get an ideal response.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah, and I really want everybody to hear these tools, but I just want to stay for a few minutes more with this understanding of the fear. You know, in my 6-month intensives, I originally created those for single people, and then people who were in relationships said, I really want to be a part of this too. And so I'm thinking about what you're saying with the struggles that people experience in both of those cases. The single people who, on a date or in early dating, struggle with, do I say what didn't feel good? Do I ask for what I want, etc.? It's so hard and so important and also sets the stage for the future. And then for people who are in relationships, and this was so powerful for me to see that the work of people who are in relationships is so much to be able to articulate our asks, talk about what feels uncomfortable, talk about what it is that we need. And what I have found is that it's harder than we think. It's just really harder than we think. So I think these tools are so key because if we're in a good relationship, it's easy to think, I should just be able to do this. Or I'm in a good relationship, I should just be able to let this go because things are great. And then the other piece, so I guess I'm bringing up how this is for people in early dating and how they deal with their fear. And then for people in relationships, I guess we'll talk about those tools in a moment. But if you could say something about the dating process and kind of how easy it is to squash our authenticity.
Oh my God, it is so difficult to speak up. So first, let me say two things. One, I, as an adult, was dating for many years as a divorced single mom. I was 11 years single between marriages. So, it's not just I work with a lot of people who are dating or dating after divorce as a therapist, but I've also been there myself. And I had those moments where despite knowing what I know, I didn't say something. It's very difficult. I like to say this process is actually incredibly simple, which is true, but it's not easy. It's difficult. So I want to give a nod to that. And, I want to also say that to me, the biggest message that we have to understand is that I already mentioned emotional maturity, but this is the value of dating, of relationships, is that other people in these intimate situations push your buttons. They push on your raw spots, on your potential triggers in ways nobody else in your life can. Not your friends, not your coworkers. And it shows us where we still need to grow and evolve. And this idea, as challenging as it is, of speaking up for yourself, taking care of your own inner child. We all have that little vulnerable person still in our bodies, our grown-up bodies. And really saying when something isn't right or doesn't feel good. Yes, it's difficult, and it is our greatest task of emotional maturity, and it is our fundamental responsibility to ourselves to do this. So I see it as our growth journey, each and every one of us, to figure out how to do this. And that said, it's not easy. So when you're early in the dating experience, it's very challenging because you're super vulnerable. you don't really know someone yet. You don't know how they're going to react. You may be just getting a conversation going and they've said something that rubs you the wrong way or offends you, or you're not sure how they received something that you've said. And it can feel so strange and even inappropriate to actually address something head on, because most people are conflict avoidant and most people don't do that. But I do think we can use a little bit of discernment, right? The situation, how safe we feel, the other factors that are present, and err on the side of saying something, but saying something clearly and gently. And this is the hugest part of assertive communication that I think gets lost, whether it's in early dating or later in a relationship. It's the same muscles, right? It's the same tools applied to different situations, as you've already said. So it's really that assertiveness, and as women, let me just say, assertiveness is still, women are still judged tremendously for being assertive, that we're seen as difficult or called aggressive, where men tend to be told good for you, you're a strong man. But assertiveness is really just being clear, direct, honest, but also being kind. Assertive is not aggressive. So let's say you're on a date and someone said something to you and you didn't like it. You might just say, I'm sure you had no malintent with what you said, but I just want to let you know how that landed with me. Are you open to hearing about that? It's a truthful statement. You're not blaming the person. You're not accusing them of anything. And if they're receptive, then you can share more about how it felt inside.
I love that. As you're speaking, I'm just thinking that the meta theme here in some way is about peacekeeping and creating peace. And then I'm thinking of it, though, as what you're teaching is dynamic peacemaking.
I love
because it's not
that.
passive, it's dynamic. That's what's inspiring me about this. It's like work. It is work, but it builds something that wouldn't otherwise be built. So I love what you're saying. And so now I want to move on to you sharing tools. But before that, I just also want to mention that I've seen in my work that marginalized people, members of marginalized communities, may have a particularly hard time with this. For example, people who are neurodiverse and have shame around that and feel like, how do I take up space with this extra need that I have? LGBTQ people, people of color, women, people with other kind of disabilities as well, I think more easily are kind of like reeled in from sharing this. So any thoughts that you want to share about getting support for these communities?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so true. And I've seen this so much in my work with clients. And I think we have to think about the intersectionality of each individual and the various reasons why it might be harder to speak up. I will say, even though I'm a woman, in many other ways, I have these identities that make it easier for me to move through the world, like being white and being able-bodied and not being neurodiverse. And I also grew up in an environment where speaking up was encouraged, and still I struggled, right? Still I struggled. And I do think that I've felt the identity piece of being a woman, and that people want to hear from you in certain situations, but not others.
Right. And then the whole romantic piece about if you want an alpha male, you got to be really careful with that because you could scare them off, and the fragility of alpha maleness.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I think that I think there are men, and I'm heterosexual, so I will just speak for a second to this piece of the experience, but then I want to extrapolate it out, that when I was younger, I very much loved the traditional alpha male. But I never really, I always let my personality be bold and very forward. But when I'd get into a relationship, and I think men who liked smart women who had a lot to say were the ones who were attracted to me. But when I get deeper in the relationship and something could make me feel like, oh, if I said this, they might think I'm too much, or I might push them away, or they might not love me anymore. I've really struggled with those things as I got deeper into the connection.
So true.
And some people do better with the part where they don't know people and then they're more outspoken. when they get more connected. But I want to go back to what you're saying about people with marginalized identities and various different particularities that make it challenging, because I think it's so true. And I think that, of course, I want to encourage everybody that we feel all that awkwardness and that we may counter very hurtful or unfair reactions, but that it's still worth doing.
Yes.
And it is so self-reinforcing, because the
Yes.
one piece that does happen is that when you say something and you take care of yourself with self-compassion and validation, bolstering yourself that, you know what, I didn't get a good response and that person stinks, but like, good for me, right? It really builds your confidence. And
Yeah.
more it becomes possible and it becomes easier. And then we do have a contagion effect where the people around us, when we do this, people around us then feel like they have permission to be vulnerable, to be
Beautiful.
honest, to be
Beautiful.
assertive. So it's worth it for all of us, but it is harder for some than others. And I think we have to acknowledge that.
I really appreciate that. And that's so true. So in your book, you have 3 sections. And the second section is about finding your authentic voice. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so it's a process that I've developed that pulls from many of the, I'm sure there's some of the same stuff in your work. There's so many different models that address these same things. So it's not really that I've developed anything unique, but I've put my own spin on what I've seen from years of therapy really, really works and makes this actionable and accessible. And I call it self-connected communication, because our
I love that.
Yeah, our connection to ourselves is the most important. And if you're
Yes.
not connected to yourself, you can't have emotional intimacy. You can't connect to anybody else without that wall being there, right? Or what I
True.
call a
True.
surface relationship. So it all starts, this communication and finding your voice starts with tuning inward, getting curious, and processing so that you understand what you feel and need before, and you get very, very clear on that and what you want to say before you approach another person, whether it's on a date or in a relationship that's evolving. Let's say you're in that midpoint where, you're kind of dating somebody and it's not super serious yet. I think that can be the hardest stage of all, really, for people. So it's really and first let me say, just scientifically, that feelings, it's not a woo-woo thing. I grew up in a family where my dad's a doctor, my mom's a lawyer. They're very smart, wonderful people, but they're very logical, right? And analytical. And I've always been this big feeler. So I think there's a temptation still, especially in American society, to act like feelings are kind of woo-woo and it's really not true. Feelings are emotional, they're information processing signals in the form of emotions that are designed to go off in your body to point you to your needs.
Oh, that was so well said. That was
and it's
great.
so true, right? So if we're dismissing our emotions, we're just compartmentalizing them, pushing them aside, we're really not listening to ourselves. And we can't even advocate for our needs if we don't know what they are. And what I hear so often from people is, well, I don't know what I feel. I don't know what I need. Or I know what I feel, but I don't know what I need. And you do know. It's like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. She's running around looking for this ridiculous little man who turned out to be a hoax anyway, trying to find the answer outside herself, when all along, all she had to do was click her heels and she could go home. You know, your intuitive self knows. So the first part of self-connected communication is to go inward, notice what's happening in your body, sensations in the body, like a pit in the stomach, tension in your chest, a lump in your throat, a headache, right? These are often the first signs that emotions are happening. And then we want to tune into our emotions and actually name them. Not an interpretation of well, I think you don't care about me, or I feel like you don't care about me, right? That people say. That's an interpretation. That's what I would call the story. But first we want to name our feelings. I'm anxious, I'm lonely, I'm sad, I'm scared, I'm hurt, I'm angry, right? All roads go back to a couple of core emotions. And in relationships, it's most often surface level anger, irritation, or frustration. And then underneath it, fear, shame, hurt, loneliness, right? These are the core things to the feelings to the human experience. So we want to name those because that helps us regulate a little, and then it helps us point to our own needs. And then you go inside and really ask yourself, I like to close my eyes, you don't have to, and just ask yourself directly, that part of you, like, what is this emotion trying to tell me? How would I comfort a friend? Do I need reassurance? Do I need behavior change? What would I say? What would I hope would happen for somebody I love if they were feeling the way I am? By getting really curious, you're going to find that your intuitive voice answers you. You have what I call a sage self inside, and this is a wise, loving adult that has way more information that you realize if only you'll tune in and listen. So this is the whole first step before we get into the expressing, is finding out what you feel and need, because you can't communicate if you don't know that.
Yeah, there was just so much in what you said, because you talked about first starting with the signals that something's going on for you, and then moving into identifying what the feelings are there. And then this other part, which I really want to encourage people not to gloss over, because that was a really strong and powerful instruction for gaining self-wisdom, connecting to your intuition, and self-validation in a deep way, dignifying what you're experiencing by thinking about, what do I need? What would I advise someone I care about? I just want to really encourage people, don't miss that step, because it's huge.
It's the whole
huge.
thing.
It's central.
It's the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the way you say it, Ken. I love the term dignifying what you're experiencing, because
Yeah.
we want to witness ourselves. And I think that's the part that often falls to the wayside. We're so thinking about how we show up for other people, which is important, but let's show up for us and let's validate that we're feeling how we're feeling for a reason. Our feelings are never wrong. They're never stupid or silly. Now, what you do with them, once you have that information, you have choices, but we've got to tune in and really honor ourselves that what we're experiencing is happening for a reason. Something important needs our attention.
Beautiful. I love that you are starting with this, and I want you to continue. What do we do next after this foundational work you just described?
Yeah. So I give also, I just want to let people know in the book, I really make this very step-by-step, lots of exercises, lots of scripts that can be used
Beautiful.
not only in romantic relationships too, even though I focused on that in the book, just because I do a lot of couples therapy and divorce therapy, but this can be applied to all of our relationships, our close friendships, and our family members, and even coworkers. So once we've gone inward, and like you said, that validation piece, that self-compassion, talking to ourselves like we would someone we love. We tend to be really hard on ourselves, so let's not invalidate our own experience. And once we get clear, I encourage people to write these things down if possible, because it really, really helps you to process and distill and clarify. And I give a very detailed tool in the book called the Self-Connected Communication Blueprint that walks you through exactly the questions and exactly the way. It's almost like Mad Libs for emotional maturity and intimacy.
Oh, that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
That sounds like it would be so helpful to
I
people.
use it myself in because emotions, when you're in the swirl of them, they can feel big and confusing. So these things help. Once we get clear on, I didn't say this part as much, but what's the story that you're making up? The brain is a meaning-making machine. So if you let's take if I could just give a little example here.
Please.
Let's take somebody on like a fourth date, okay? And somebody makes a comment. I'm trying to think of something. Okay, somebody makes a comment about where they like to vacation, and the other person makes a very strong statement that they hate that place and here's why. And, it becomes this sort of debating style.
Okay, yeah.
Just to give like an anecdotal thing. So one person might go, God, that was so obnoxious and rude. This person is so opinionated and arrogant, and they don't care about the fact that I have a different opinion, right? Somebody else might go, wow, what an interesting opinion. Let's debate this more because they're wrong and I'm going to show them why. This is fun, right? And somebody else might go, oh my goodness, like I offended them and they're so intense. Like I shouldn't have said what I said. I should have kept that to myself. I'm so opinionated.
Great examples.
You're going to have wildly different ways things land. So what we really want to do is realize that the story you come up with.
But it sounds like he was a jerk.
Right. I agree. Right. I'm with you. Totally would not work for me at all. I would not be going on a 5th date. But everybody's going to react differently. So I want people to part of what we're writing down before we communicate is also identifying the narrative, the meaning our brains have made of what happened that bothered us or is on our mind. There's always going to be a meaning and it's going to feel like the truth, but we want to try to hold it lightly and name it as the story. So this is an important piece, right? Like you really see this as a therapist, Ken, because in my office, I'll see the very same kinds of responses. And one person will, when I'm doing couples work, one person will say, oh my God, you're trying to manipulate me. I knew it. And another person will say, thank you so much for sharing your feelings with me. That was so helpful to understand, to the same response.
Yes.
So what we want to hold is that whatever we come up with is likely informed by our family of origin, our personality, our cultural experiences, and not blame and accuse other people. To realize that we've interpreted it as we have and to let them know, hey, here's the story I came up with, or here's what this said to me. So this is part of it. You're going to go in this blueprint, you're going to come up with what you feel, you're going to know your emotions, you're going to be able to name the story, right? This told me that what I had to say didn't matter to you. You didn't want to hear my opinion. That's the meaning I made. My feelings were anger, disappointment, sadness. I'm just making this up. And then we get to what I need, and it's what I need in this moment. And this is really big, and I want to encourage people because I think needs are so misunderstood. You're never too needy, number one. Most of what you need a lot of the time is going to be comfort, reassurance, validation, support. These emotional attachment needs that because we're relational beings are so key.
You just cut through so much confusion to get to the heart of most of what it is that we need.
Yes, that's what we need. And there might be behavior change too. And I'll give an example, but the behavior change is probably not the biggest piece. And sometimes there's no behavior change needed. Many, many things in dating and relationships are just simple misunderstandings. Right? You and I are both old enough to remember the game of telephone. I don't know if the younger generation still does anything that's not digital at this point.
Right.
But you whisper in one person's ear and you say purple poodle and they hear pink elephant. And it's like, what? Communication is 7% valid. 7% by words.
That is a wild statistic. That's an evidence-based statistic.
Yes, it's
That's
like Murabian's
scary.
rule. Yeah. So it was so much of it is tone and facial expression, nonverbals, right? The energy you transmit. So what we know is that words are going to be misinterpreted, and we're all so different, right? So I could say something that feels very innocuous and somebody else might be upset or offended. And we want to care as good human beings, relational beings. We want to care about our impact, not our intentions, and not get defensive. But we also want to express ourselves in a way that gives the other person the best chance possible of being heard. So saying this all gently. And these needs for hey, when you said that, just to give an example, when you made that statement, I just want to slow down for a second and share with you. It didn't land well with me. I felt hurt and confused and even a little irritated by what you said. And it seems like the story I made up about it is that you don't care about my opinion, right? I'm not saying that's the truth, but that's the message I got from what you said. And what I really need right now is for you to clarify what you meant by that and to reassure me that I am important to you. I'm just making up a very ambiguous example so it's really making sure you identify what you need in that moment. And much of the time, it's going to be to know the core human attachment needs, that you matter to someone, that they care about your opinion, that you're valuable in their eyes, that you're important to them, that you're a priority, that they care about your feelings, right? Even in dating, you want to know somebody cares about your feelings. If you tell someone, when I didn't hear from you for 4 days, I was surprised and I was disappointed. And I care about this relationship enough to take the trouble, to go through the trouble to tell you how I really feel. And I think what I need most is not necessarily for you to do anything different, but to understand why I haven't heard from you. And maybe for you to reassure me that you are invested in this, if that's the case, right? So we're very open, non-accusatory, but we're telling the truth. And by doing all of this work on the front end to process and connect to yourself, you're able to give a very clear statement.
Beautiful. So what is your experience of what shifts for people when they do this work? What have you seen?
Amazing things. And I've guinea pigged myself because I always say I'm a people pleaser in recovery, and I'll be in recovery forever. That part of me is still there, but I have experienced the benefits of finding and using my voice, and so have so many of my clients. You really build your confidence, your sense of self-worth, your ability to know that you can do hard things. You reduce the fear. You realize that you can start to speak up in rooms where you might have once not felt at all comfortable to do so.
So it generalizes.
Yes. And it trickles into every corner of your life. And I think one of the most, I don't talk about this part often, but it just popped into my head. I think the fear really shifts. You start to get more comfortable having a relationship with healthy, normal fear. To know that I don't know that the fear ever goes away when a relationship's really important to you and you're about to be vulnerable. It's actually natural for that to feel scary.
Yes.
And you can do it and you have to, because otherwise you're filled with resentment, animosity, you're shut down. You become sick. We know that when we hold things in, we get sick, and you will feel in your body, because of how we're designed as human beings, that when you say the truth and you say it diplomatically and respectfully, and you don't feel the need to manage how other people receive it, you will feel in your body how good it feels, the relief and the sense of empowerment.
It's wonderful. My feeling is that there's the image that I keep getting is of Christmas and these boxes of really cool things, and you're unpacking all these boxes. There's still a lot more to unpack. People can learn about that in your book. And I just feel like this is, in some ways, the primary relationship issue. And something that I teach that connects to this is that the very things we're most afraid to share about are where our deepest intimacy gifts actually lie.
100%.
Those very things, so that there's another treasure there that gets discovered. But your work feels so important and so articulated, grounded in a lot of compassion, a lot of spiritual insight, but also really operationalized. So tell us how people can learn more from you, follow you, get your book.
Yes.
Tell us how we can learn from your work.
Thank you so much, Ken. And I just love the way you put everything I have to say.
Oh,
And,
thanks.
my final thought here is like vulnerability for the win. Exactly what you said. It is scary.
Vulnerability for the win.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
great.
treasure trove. Most of the time when you're vulnerable, like a lot of people are going to meet you there. It creates such powerful connection, and there's nothing better in life. So if you want
Did you just invent that meme?
What meme? Vulnerability for the win?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that. That's a motto. That's great.
I know. I need to get like a little avatar thingy to go with it.
Yes,
I'm going to
we
work
need some
on that.
bling. Yes.
I love it. So you can find me and find my book and all that good stuff on my website, ColetteJaneFehr.com. It's ColetteJaneFehr.com. And my book's there. I have tons of free resources. If you buy my book before Tuesday, before it comes out, I have a digital course that goes with the book that's free. I have a toolkit.
Everyone do that.
Yes, please do that. Please do that.
Get those gifts.
Yes. And you can buy extra books to give to your friends and get all kinds of freebies. And then I'm pretty active on Instagram. I'm on all the social media, but Instagram, I think, is my primary one, and Substack. On Instagram, I'm at Colette Jane Fehr. And on Substack, I write a Substack weekly called Secrets from a Therapist. And I offer a lot of information, tools, advice on all kinds of relationships that people might really enjoy as well.
Fantastic. And I'm just thinking that anyone who's in a relationship, be great if you get 2 books, one for each of you, and do this work together as a couple. Yeah.
That would be amazing. And I do think that if you read the book and you're not in a relationship, you'd get a lot out of it, because when you're dating, like you said, this is when you set the stage.
You know it.
Yeah. And it's so important. And if I were single now again, or if I one day end up single, I mean, you never know what's going to happen in life. There's no guarantees. I would really be looking for somebody who wants to have deeper conversations, and even if they're scared to, is willing to work at that with me, because I think there's no greater quality in a relationship than this.
I love that. And people can also follow you on your podcast.
Yes.
Colette, would you say the name again of the podcast?
Yes, Insights from the Couch. I know I'm always forgetting. I don't promote myself well. Insights from the Couch, real talk for women at midlife. You don't have to be a midlife woman to get something out of it, but it's 2 therapists who are women at midlife. So we take that angle. And then also Love Thy Neighbor, the relationship show that I co-host with 2 men, Tom Van and Dan Dennis, who are local radio celebrities here where I live in Florida. And it's a great, fun show where we dive into all kinds of relationship issues.
Beautiful. Colette, it was a joy to get to share you with my audience. And folks, take advantage of this treasure trove. So thank you all. Thank you, Colette, and thank you all for being here. And I look forward to connecting on the next episode of the Deeper Dating Podcast.
And that's it for today's episode of Deeper Dating. Be sure to go to deeperdatingpodcast.com, as Ken has a few more gifts for you. Then join us on the next episode.